Hello everyone, welcome to the part 2B. So in fact the part 2 video on this NCERT as it is review for the basic concepts of chemistry, right? We have divided this into 2A and 2B so that we can cover this in parts. In 2A, right, we talked about the uncertainty part in the measurement of the physical quantities. We looked at how do we count the significant figures in a measurement value, and how we will be dealing with the use of significant figures when we are using mathematical operations, like when you are doing addition, subtraction or multiplication, division. How do we deal with the significant figures? So all that we have covered in the section 2A. Now in this session, right, we are going to be looking at the basic laws in chemistry, including Dalton's atomic theory, and also we will look at the idea of what is this atomic mass and what is the molecular mass. See, think of it this way: when we want to talk about these basic laws of chemistry, right, there are two things that we need to mention. One is, as we stand today, based on our current level of knowledge, we can say these laws in a way are redundant. That's one. And some of these laws we will also see that they will be obsolete. Now the word obsolete, right, in a way, it's like saying we have discarded them, we are no longer using them, because there is probably something fundamentally wrong with that law. But like we always keep saying, even when we go to the other chapters also, right, if there is some fundamental issue with law or scientific discovery, we will never see that the textbooks will mention it saying, this is wrong. Because to respect the contribution of the scientist, right, so we will say, even if, say for example, we go to structure of the atom chapter. First, J.J. Thomson has proposed a model for the atom. I'm sure we have studied this in the 9th standard also. Later it is proved that the J.J. Thomson model is not able to explain the observations. So we say there are drawbacks with the J.J. Thomson's model. So we will never say that J.J. Thomson's model is wrong in that sense. Okay. So it's a way of giving honor and respect for the contribution. But yeah, now coming back to the discussion about these basic laws in chemistry, we'll see that some of them will be redundant because we have now better concepts to study the same thing, like the stoichiometric analysis, right, is a better way of studying the chemical reactions or the chemical phenomena, and that makes some of these laws to be redundant. So no longer we have to look at these laws of chemical combinations to understand the phenomena. We can do the same thing in a better way with the stoichiometry. And as I said, some of these laws are obsolete. So we'll see what are some of the major issues with the laws because of which we are discarding them. We are no longer using them. So I have to give you the background so that we will know. But then the question comes, why are we still learning? Because remember, I've seen a lot of students asking, sir, if the atom is not like what J.J. Thomson has proposed, then why are we beginning the discussion with J.J. Thomson's model? Then we go to the Rutherford's model, isn't it? Then we'll say that Rutherford's model is also not able to explain. Then we'll go to the Bohr's model. That is till our 9th standard understanding of the structure of atom. Then in the +1 we will see that the Bohr's model also will not be able to explain all the observations. Then we will go to a new model called as a quantum model. I've seen students asking, sir, why are we beginning from J.J. Thomson? Why can't we just start with the quantum model and finish the story? The point is, unless we start from Thomson's model, we would not be able to sequentially understand, because what is science at the end of the day? it's a effort, continuous effort, as I said in the session 0, it's a continuous effort to understand the phenomena around us. So how the understanding has evolved, only when we get the point right, we will be able to, yes, of course, appreciate the contribution of these scientists. So they made very, very valuable contribution, but at the same time, we will also be able to really understand how the clarity has come to people on certain observations. So that is the reason why we will always have a, a chronology, in the sense, we'll always have a sequence of events as to how things have developed. Okay, so we'll talk about the laws of chemical combination, then we'll talk about Dalton's atomic theory, and also we look at the concepts of atomic and molecular masses. Let's start. So the very, very fundamental theory for the chemistry is considered as the law of conservation of mass. Anthony Lavoisier, right, amongst a lot of things that he has done, he has performed very careful experimental studies on the combustion reactions. Because think of it, when you are, say for example, we have some wood, okay, so we are doing the combustion of the wood. Then obviously what happens when you are doing the combustion of the wood, these gases, if you let it open, means what happens, the gases will escape, and the remaining part of it, the ash and all that, will be left behind. If you try to measure what is the mass of the wood that is there initially, and try to compare this with the mass of the ash, right, you may see that because obviously this is a very common thing, right, the size of the wood that is there initially will be very huge, and look at what will be the size of the ash, it will be small. You may think that mass is getting destroyed, but that's not how you will study the conservation of mass concept. So you will have to look at everything that is there before the beginning of the reaction. Means here you will be having what? Wood is one reactant, wood material basically, and the other reactant is what? The air that is there. You have to keep this in a closed container. You should not allow anything to escape. So that's why we mentioned the word careful experimental studies. So if you look at what is the total mass of all the reactants before the reaction, total mass of all the products, means you have to include the mass of the ash and mass of the escape gases. Usually these gases will escape, right? Whether it is a carbon dioxide, water vapor, you have to include that mass also. And based on these observations, right, he was able to conclude that there will be no net change in the mass during a process. So whether it is a physical process or a chemical process. And based on that, he has reached the conclusion that whenever we are performing a chemical reaction, mass can neither be created nor be destroyed. This is what we will call as the law of conservation of mass. Now, one thing we need to understand is a law is basically something which is proposed to explain the experimental observations. Law is proposed to explain the experimental observations, and we accept there will be no proof for that. He was able to perform some experiments, and based on the experimental observations, right, he has proposed the law saying mass can neither be created nor be destroyed during a physical change or a chemical change. We are accepting it as a truth until somebody will come and disprove it. Like even say for example in physics, right, you will say Newton's second law talks about the force acting on a body will be equal to what? Mass of the body times acceleration generated. So this is what Newton's second law. Now you will accept it as a truth until somebody disproves it. Okay, so that's how we will take the end, because this is able to explain the observation. When you look at some force applied on the object and you will see what is the acceleration value, they will be able to fit into the formula. Okay, so that's the idea about the law, whether it is in chemistry or in physics also. Their main purpose is to explain the observations. Now we will see, after some time, right, the so-called law of conservation of mass will also have some limitations. We will talk about what that is. Now the second law, there is no order as such, but the second one that we look at is this law of definite proportion. This French chemist, right, Joseph Proust, he was observing the composition. I mean, not just that he was the only one observing, he was observing the composition of various compounds. And when he was looking at the case of cupric carbonate and seeing what is the composition of copper and carbon and oxygen, that the composition is remaining same. Composition means we are talking about what? Mass percentage, or we can say weight percentage also. That mass percentage of copper, look at this, 51.35. Whether you get the cupric carbonate sample which is naturally coming or which is made synthetically, in both these samples, right, the mass percentage of copper, carbon and oxygen, right, that is remaining the same. So based on that he was able to, because remember one thing, today a cupric carbonate means what? You will think, okay, this formula is a CuCO3. Obviously when you look at the cupric carbonate, you will have a certain ratio of the atoms, right? So for every one copper atom you will have one carbon and then 3 oxygens. So it makes sense for us because we know what is called as molecular formula. It looks kind of very common sense to us, but remember at that point of time, right, the cupric carbonate formula is not known to people. This molecular formula concept, right, has come much later. All that they knew was, yes, this compound is having copper, carbon and oxygen. They don't know the molecular formula concept. So it is at that time the law of definite proportion, or we can also call it as what? The law of constant proportion. You can also call it as a law of constant proportion. So what he stated is a given compound will always contain same proportion of elements by weight percentage or mass percentage. Remember what I said? In chemistry we interchangeably use weight and mass. So this is what is the law of definite proportions or constant proportions. So irrespective of what is the source, wherever you get it, a given compound always contains same elements combined together in the same proportion by mass. Like say for example, I will talk about another example. We get CO2 by burning coal, we get carbon dioxide by burning wood, and we get carbon dioxide by burning some other fuel substance. From all the sources, when you get the carbon dioxide, right, the mass percentage of carbon to the mass percentage of oxygen will remain the same, irrespective of what is the source from which you get it. And this compound will always contain carbon and oxygen, because at that time, right, that is also a very important revelation. The compound will always contain same elements which are combining in the fixed mass proportion. After some time we will see why this law, which is based on mass percentage, may not be always correct. I mean, we should not use the word may not be always correct, because as I said, right, we will never say the law is wrong or anything. So what we will say, we will see how the law of a definite proportion will become obsolete. We will see that. Okay. Now the next law is a law of multiple proportion. This is about if you have one element combining the other element in different ways. Like say for example, carbon and oxygen, they can combine to form carbon monoxide. Remember one thing, the molecular formula of these compounds is not known at that point of time. If at all people had understanding of the molecular formula, right, then this entire discussion itself would not be there. And that is the reason why I said what today, why these some of the laws are redundant, because we have better understanding of the chemical substances now through the molecular formula concept. Same way carbon oxygen can also combine to give us what? Carbon dioxide. We know today that what is the formula for the CO2. So the law of multiple proportions, right, says if two elements are combined to form more than one compound, then the mass of one element that is combining with a fixed mass of another element means what? Look at this. Hydrogen and oxygen, they can combine to produce water. Today we know what is the formula for the water, H2O. Hydrogen and oxygen, they can also combine to form hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide formula is H2O2. We will in fact learn about this in hydrogen and its compounds. But here I don't want to put the formula because that was not available when this law is proposed. Okay. So look at this. With 2 grams of hydrogen, 16 grams of oxygen will combine to produce 18 grams of water. With 2 grams of hydrogen, 32 grams of oxygen will combine to produce 34 grams of hydrogen peroxide. So what is it? With given mass of one element, the amount of the other element that is combining will be in the small whole number ratio. So look at this. So hydrogen, we are fixing it as what? 2 grams. With 2 grams of hydrogen, in this case, what is the amount of oxygen that is combining? 16. In this case, what is the amount of oxygen that is combining? 32. So you see what is the ratio of this? 16 is 32 is what? 1:2. So with 2 grams of hydrogen, when you take the ratio of what is the mass of oxygen combining, right? 16:32 is what? 1:2. Like this, we will get the simple ratio. Now, as I said, this may look like very common sense to us based on our current understanding. So we know what is water formula, H2O. With 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom combines. The mass ratio will be accordingly. In hydrogen peroxide, with 2 hydrogen atoms, we have 2 oxygen atoms. We can see the oxygen amount will be just doubling. So this is the clarity we have based on the molecular formula. But remember, that time the idea of molecular formula was not yet discovered. Okay, so this is about the law of multiple proportions. Now we can look at the other examples also, but the another important law, this is about particularly the chemical reactions in gaseous phase. It's for the chemical reactions happening in the gaseous phase. So Gay-Lussac's law of gaseous volumes, or we can say combining volumes also. It says when the gas are combining or getting formed in a chemical reaction, right, they'll be combining or they'll be getting formed in a simple ratio in terms of volume, in a simple ratio by volume. Provided all the gas are at the same temperature and pressure, because when you are performing a reaction means everything will be in the reaction chamber, right, reaction container or reaction chamber, everything will be inside. So if you maintain all of them in the same container with the same temperature and pressure, right, what is the thing? The ratio in terms of volume in which they will combine and also the volume in which they will get formed, that will be in a simple numeric ratio. So if you look at hydrogen combining with oxygen to produce water vapor, right, what is experimentally, see, remember all these things are what experimentally observed. With every 100 ml of hydrogen, 50 ml of oxygen is going to react, and that is going to finally give us what? 100 ml of the water vapor. So if you look at the ratio in which the hydrogen and oxygen are combining, right, what is the volume ratio? 100:50 means what is it? Simple value means it will be what? 2:1. So even if you look at the sense, right, so 2 volumes of the hydrogen will combine with 1 volume of oxygen. Means here if it is like say 100 ml, it will be what? 50 ml, and that is going to give us what? 2 volumes of water vapor, means 100 ml. If you take here 50 ml, if 50 ml is like 2 volumes, 1 volume means what? 25 ml. That will give us the 2 volumes of water vapor, means what? It will be giving us 50 ml, like that. So always the ratio will be what? 2:1:2. 2:1 is for the ratio in which the hydrogen and oxygen are combining, volume ratio, and 2 is for the ratio in which the water vapor is getting formed. So if you look at it in a simple way, right, this Gay-Lussac's law is more like the law of definite proportion by volume. So what is the law of definite proportion? When atoms are combining to form a compound, the mass percentage of the elements will be what? Fixed. Here what you are saying, when they are combining to form a product, the volume ratio, right, will be always having a simple numeric ratio. This Gay-Lussac's law of gaseous volumes or combining volumes, right, is something that is explained more clearly by the Avogadro's hypothesis or Avogadro's work. We will see how the Avogadro's law will be able to explain the Gay-Lussac's law of gaseous volumes. So what is this Avogadro's law? So the thing about the Avogadro's law is this is the law which has which is able to clearly distinguish between atoms and molecules. We will see what is the irony of this also, because the clarity on what is the fundamental state of the particles, whether they are atoms or molecules, was still not clear at that point of time. So he has proposed that if you have equal volumes of gases at the same condition of temperature and pressure, then they should be containing equal number of molecules. So he was able to clearly differentiate the idea of molecules. Now if you look at the law of combining volumes, so what is it? We have seen, the volume ratio is what? 2 volumes of hydrogen will be combining with what? 1 volume of oxygen to produce 2 volumes of water. So if you look at this, right, under conditions of same temperature and pressure, that is what we are dealing with. 1 volume means, let us say, n number of molecules. Another volume means what? Another n number. 1 volume is what? N number of. So which means what? 2n molecules of hydrogen gas will combine with what? N molecules of oxygen gas, because what is the concept? Equal volumes means each volume will be containing what? Equal number of molecules. That equal number is what I am calling as n. So each box is going to be having what? N. Here this is like 2 volumes means what? It is 2 boxes, means it will be giving us what? 2n molecules of water vapor. So how the Avogadro's law is able to provide clarity is, when you say the volumes ratio in which they combine will be a simple numeric value. Why is it so? Because at the end of the day, what happens in chemical reaction? The molecules will be combining in a simple numeric ratio, right? So further we have today clarity that what is the actual reaction? 2H2 plus O2 gives rise to what? 2H2O. This is what we call as the balanced equation. And the study of this balanced equation is what we will be referring as the stoichiometry. Okay. So that is the reason why I said, with stoichiometry concept, all the basic laws are now kind of redundant. We can study the chemical reactions or chemical phenomena in a much better way using the stoichiometry principles. You see here what is happening? For every 2 molecules of H2, 1 molecule of O2 will react, and that will be giving us what? 2 molecules of water vapor. Look at this ratio, 2:1:2. See, what is it? The number of molecules will be in what ratio? 2:1:2. So this is how the Avogadro's law was able to provide clarity for the combining volumes. So in this, right, he has used the concept of molecules, including oxygen and hydrogen. As per him, right, the basic particles of the oxygen is not oxygen atoms, it is what? Diatomic oxygen molecules. The basic particles of hydrogen is not hydrogen atoms, it is what? H2 molecules. And this is what is not accepted by the people. so including Dalton, all the others, right? They did not agree with the idea that two hydrogen atoms will be able to combine with each other. They did not agree with the idea that two oxygen atoms will be able to combine with each other. And as per them, right, these hydrogen and oxygen molecules, where the two atoms of oxygen, two atoms of hydrogen will combine to form molecule, right? As per them, these don't exist. You see the thing. People did not even, though we know today it is very accurate, right? This law was not taken in. This is not accepted. It took 50 years. In fact, look at this. What is this period? 1776 to 1856. After his death in 1860, after about 50 years of when he's proposed, people started giving recognition to his work, and people started accepting whatever the law or the proposition that he was putting forward. So the point is, sometimes, right, because of the at the end of the day, in scientific community also we'll have influences. Now the person who is the kind of culprit, okay, so for discrediting the Avogadro's hypothesis or Avogadro's law, right, is the great John Dalton. So though the idea of the smallest indivisible particle, atom, right, going back to the BC era in Greek philosophy and Greek scholars, the word atomio basically means, A is a negative prefix, and atomio basically referring to cut. So atomio means which you cannot cut any further. That's the literal meaning of the indivisible particle. Dalton, proposed the new system of chemical philosophy. In this, he has used the idea of atom, and with some postulations, he tried explaining the chemical laws. Like as per him, right, matter consists of these smallest particles called as what? Atoms. Atoms of a given element, right, like all atoms of iron will have identical properties, they will have identical mass, they will have identical sizes. Atoms of different elements, they will have different mass, they will have different sizes, they will have different properties. We'll see what will be the problem with this. And he talked about how the compounds will get formed. So compounds will be formed when atoms of different elements combine in a fixed ratio. Means what? If, say for example, we talk about the cupric carbonate. So one copper atom will combine with what? One carbon and then three oxygens. This is how the cupric carbonate is getting formed. The atoms are combining in the fixed ratio. When they are combining fixed ratio, right, obviously when you take the mass percentage, it will be also remaining what? Fixed. So this is how he was able to explain the law of definite proportion. And he didn't talk about the formation of molecules with same atoms. Like look at this point, it's talking about what? Atoms of different elements combining. As per this theory, atoms of same element, they cannot combine. That is why they have not agreed to the Avogadro's concept of these polyatomic molecules. Hydrogen existing as H2 molecule, oxygen existing as O2 molecule, they are not accepting to it. And the other thing is, it says chemical reactions are basically reorganization of atoms. In reactants, we will have atoms arranged in a particular way. In products, we will have atoms. So we will have the reactants and products. What is the basic difference? The way the atoms are arranged will be different. That's it. Atoms can neither be created nor be destroyed in a chemical reaction. Means what? Since mass is coming from atoms, it means mass can neither be created nor be destroyed. So what is this? This is able to support the law of conservation of mass. Okay, so this way the Dalton's theory, right, is able to explain the law of conservation of mass and law of definite proportions. But as we have mentioned, the law of gaseous volumes or combining volumes, Avogadro's hypothesis was able to explain it, but Dalton's theory could not. Why? Because as per the Dalton's theory, right, these polyatomic molecules of H2O2, atoms of same element combining, right, this concept was not allowed. Even the Dalton's theory, what it said is, okay, the atoms of different elements, they combine to form a compound, but what is the reason for the combination? They are combining, that is okay, but what is the reason for the combination? That clarity also was not provided. In fact, later when we go to the theories of chemical bonding, right, as to why the atoms are combining, that we will learn in the theories of chemical bonding. So we have Lewis theory, the other, so we'll talk about this in the chemical bonding chapter. So we'll know why the chemical bonding is happening based on the theories of chemical bonding only. Dalton's theory was not able to provide a reason for that. Okay, so this is about the basic laws in chemistry and the Dalton's atomic theory. Now, as I said, right, so we'll talk about what is making these basic laws redundant on one side, and other side we will say redundant means we don't need to study them by using the basic laws, but we have a better way of studying. If you look at the idea of balanced chemical equation and the study of it, that's what we call as the stoichiometric analysis. Think about it. If we say that carbon is combining with oxygen to give us what? Carbon dioxide. So we know that, what is it? Always the combining proportion will be what? Fixed. With one carbon atom, two oxygen atoms are combining to give us what? Carbon dioxide, which means the mass percentage in which they will be present in the compound will always remain the same. The mass percentage in which they will combine will always remain the same. So this is how the law of definite proportion, right, can be understood in a much simpler way by using the balanced chemical equation. So this is able to explain what? The law of definite proportion or fixed proportion, constant proportion, we can use anything. But there is a problem with this. Whenever we talk about anything in terms of mass, so remember in our balanced chemical reaction analysis, we will say what? One carbon atom is combining with, so we will always talk in terms of number, two oxygen atoms to produce the carbon dioxide. So when we talk in terms of numbers, that is always accurate. But when you talk in terms of mass, the problem will come because of the isotopes. Carbon has got two isotopes. We will say carbon 12 and carbon 14. These are the mass numbers. What is the mass number? It is the number of protons plus number of neutrons. So carbon 12 atom will have a different mass, the actual mass of it. Carbon 14 also will have a different mass. So yes, one carbon will combine with two oxygen atoms. But if you are talking about the carbon 12 atom, means you take the mass percentage, it will be something else. Instead you take carbon 14 atom, means the mass percentage rate will be different. Same way, if you say what? 2 moles of or 2 molecules of hydrogen is combining with 1 molecule of oxygen to produce what? Water. If you look at this in terms of isotopes of hydrogen, right? Hydrogen has 3 isotopes. Hydrogen 1 we call it as protium. Hydrogen 2 it is called as deuterium. Hydrogen 3 it is called as what? Tritium. We'll talk about this in the hydrogen and compound chapter. So what are these? Protium, deuterium and then tritium. If you try to take the mass percentage, right, protium will have a different mass, deuterium will have a different mass, tritium will have a different mass. So always the analysis based on the mass will have an issue because of the isotopes. What are isotopes? These are the atoms of the same element. Carbon 12 and carbon 14, they are the atoms of the same element. So when you look at the mass of them, they will be different. So the reason why the stoichiometric analysis, or what we refer to as the analysis of the balanced equations, is we'll say more accurate without any flaw is because here we'll talk in terms of the count or the number. Whenever we'll say in terms of the mass, right, that will always have an issue because of the isotopes. Same when you talk about the conservation of mass, law of conservation of mass. What do we see? One carbon atom is combining with two oxygen atoms to produce carbon dioxide. In this you see we have one carbon, two oxygens. So atoms are neither getting destroyed nor getting created, which means what? The total mass on the left LHS reactant side should be equal to total mass on the right hand side. So this way the balanced chemical equation, it is also able to tell us how this law of conservation of mass will be true. But again, if you talk about the nuclear reactions, because the Lavoisier study is only about the combustion, and he has extended this to both physical and chemical change, but nuclear phenomena, right? What happens in nuclear phenomena? A radioactive like U-235, which is a large unstable nucleus, it will break down to form smaller fragments. That's what we call as a nuclear fission. We have one more phenomena, small nucleus like hydrogen, they will combine. We call this as what? Fusion. In nuclear reactions, what happens is mass will be converted to energy form. I'm sure a lot of you would have in science exhibition and all that, right? You will see this formula in background thing, E is equal to mc square, like that. You know what is that formula for? That formula is called as Einstein's mass energy equivalence principle. What is it called as? Einstein's mass energy equivalence principle. Means what? It says if you have a mass m, you are converting this into energy. How much energy will come from that? This much amount of energy will come. What is energy formula? M into c square. You know what is c? C is the speed of light. So in nuclear reactions, what happens? Mass will not be conserved. Then the Gay-Lussac's law of combining volumes. If you talk about a gas phase reaction, like whatever we have already studied, right? 2H2, this is the balanced. O2 gives rise to what? A 2H2O. This is the balanced equation. Hydrogen combining with oxygen to give us what? Water vapor. Now the balanced equation is telling us what? The two molecules of this will combine with what? One molecule to produce two molecules. We will study in the states of matter. How do we relate for gases, right? The number of molecules, or once we go to the mole concept, right? We will measure, because a mole is also referring to what? Count of particles. We will say number of moles instead of number of molecules, because we will have large number of molecules, right? Instead of number of molecules, we will say number of moles. What is one mole? One mole will be this Avogadro number of particles. We will have a relation between the volume of the gas and the number of moles. So what is the relation? PV is equal to nRT. This is what we call as the gas equation. So you can clearly see that when pressure and temperature are fixed, in this R is called as a gas constant. What we will have is V is equal to what? nRT by P. When pressure and temperature are same, gas constant anyway is same for all the gases. What we will observe? The ratio of the volumes of two gases, right, will be in terms of what? Ratio of their number of moles. And that is why we will always have what? When the gas are combining, they will combining in a ratio where the volumes will be always in what? A simple numeric ratio. Why is it? Because you see the volume ratio will be equal to what? Simply the number of moles ratio, or that will be also equal to what? The ratio of the molecules, the ratio in which the molecules combine. Here what is it? It is what? 2:1. What is the ratio here? It is what, 2:1. So this is how the stoichiometry or the further understanding of the gases, right, was able to give more clarity on the law of combining volumes. Now the Dalton's theory, right, we have seen what are the drawbacks of this already. So Dalton's theory was not able to talk about the combination of atoms of same element. It was always about combinations of atoms of different elements. Today we know that atoms of same element also can form molecules, right? That's what we have in oxygen molecule, hydrogen molecule, chlorine molecule. That is one thing. The second thing is, it says atoms of same element will have identical mass, identical properties. Atoms of different elements will have different mass, different properties. But when you look at isotopes of same element, let's say for example, we talk about carbon 12 and carbon 14. They are of the same element, but they have different masses. Similarly, you will have a concept of isobars. Isobars are basically the ones that will have the same mass number. The atoms that will have same mass number. Look at this. One of the carbon, which is carbon 14, and nitrogen. These two will be called as what? Isobars. Why? Because look at the mass number. Always the top left side what will keep mass number. Bottom will be the what? Atomic number. So this is the representation, right? Whenever you have an element X, here in the top we will have what? A. A is what? Mass number. Top left. Bottom left we will keep Z. Z is what? Atomic number. Okay. So this is how we look at the isotopes and isobars, how it has contradicted with one of the postulates of the Dalton's theory. And also Dalton's theory talked about the idea that atoms are combining, but why they are combining to form a compound. Atoms of different elements are combining to form a compound. That's what the Dalton's theory says. But why they are combining, that clarity also Dalton's theory was not able to provide. The basis for the chemical bonding, right, that comes later. So all these are the, we can say, drawbacks. And because we have a better way of studying about chemical phenomena, today the concept of these basic laws of chemistry is in that sense, so no longer required in the regular scheme. That's why we have said they are obsolete. So one of the reasons why they are obsolete is because of this isotopes. Because whenever you talk about the isotopes, right, what is it? These atoms of same element, they'll have different masses. And whatever theory that is based on the mass, whether it is a law of definite proportion or law of multiple proportion. Remember, we have one more law based on the mass. What is the law of multiple proportion? Any law which is based on the mass ratio, right, will always have an issue because of the isotopes. And because of isotopes, right, in 10th standard we have studied that the entire Mendeleev's table itself had an issue, because Mendeleev table is based on arranging the elements in the increasing order of atomic masses, isn't it? Now once the isotopes are discovered, right, where do we keep them? Because you have to keep them in the increasing order of atomic mass, means protium will have a place, deuterium will have a place, tritium will have to have a place. All these are what? Isotopes of same hydrogen but different masses. So the entire Mendeleev table had to be discarded because of the isotopes idea. Because Mendeleev table could not give positions for all these isotopes. Because his basis is what? We have to arrange the atoms in the increasing atomic mass, right? If you go by that, means you cannot arrange all these isotopes of, almost most of the elements, right? You talk about carbon, you talk about nitrogen, you talk about oxygen. Most of them have got isotopes. But for some of them, the isotopes will be more stable. For some, the isotopes might be less stable. In the sense, like if you talk about hydrogen, in terms of abundance, the protium has got the vast abundance. Deuterium is very less in terms of abundance, and tritium is a radioactive isotope. What is radioactive means? It is unstable, it will dissociate. Okay, so we'll talk about the isotopes in next chapter when we go to the structure of the atom. So, but this is how the basic laws in chemistry have in a way become obsolete now. Now, when we want to study about the chemical reactions or chemical phenomena, we said we are going to be referring to the relation between mass of a substance to the number of particles or count. So whenever we talk about a mass, right, the thing is we will talk about what is the mass of these smallest particles we are referring to, whether it is the atoms or the molecules. That's what we will be learning in the atomic and molecular mass. Atom is such a very small thing. At that point of time, think of it. People did not have a means to measure even the normal weights with accuracy. So obviously they will never be able to, with that technology, they will never be able to measure what is the mass of an atom. But today we have, like, spectroscopy methods, mass spectroscopy methods that can help us to find the atomic masses also. But that time, mass of one atom of copper, no way, it cannot be found. Mass of one atom of iron, you cannot find the mass of one atom of iron. So what they used is the idea of relative mass concept. So you cannot find mass of each and every atom because it's a very small one. We don't have a measuring instrument also. So they used using alternative approaches, right? The relative mass method. Like say for example, if hydrogen mass is taken as 1, just the reference, hydrogen we take it as 1. The mass of the other elements, right, they can be expressed in terms of this reference. It's always relative. If you take hydrogen mass as 1, right, using the relative density concept, they were able to give the mass of the other elements in terms of this reference. So initially they were using the reference with hydrogen and then reference with oxygen. But today what we have is the reference with the carbon isotope, carbon 12. So the reference is the mass of one carbon 12 atom, right, is taken to be what? 12 atomic mass unit. This atomic mass unit is the reference. So if you take one carbon 12 atom, the mass of this is taken to be what? 12 AMU. This is the reference unit. AMU is what? Atomic mass unit. So by this definition, right, so this is how the reference is fixed. As I said, initially they were using the reference with hydrogen, oxygen, but later this is changed to what? Carbon. Now with the carbon as a reference, this reference unit for the mass, AMU, is defined as what? Mass of one carbon 12 atom is taken to be what? 12 AMU. So one atomic mass unit will be what? 1/12 of the carbon 12 atom. See, one carbon 12 atom mass we are saying equal to what? 12 AMU, right? You bring the 12 this side, what you will have? 1/12 of carbon 12 atom mass, that is basically equal to 1 AMU. So if you look at what is the value of this rate, 1 AMU, it will be coming as what? 1.66056 into 10 power minus 24 grams. So we know what is the exact value of this 1 AMU. But at that time, right, this AMU is defined as a reference unit. So people did not know what is the actual value of AMU that time. So today we know what is the exact value of AMU, we know today. And we will see also, after some time we will see how we can also calculate this value of 1 AMU. But that time they did not know what is the exact value, but this AMU is taken as a reference. Using this AMU, right, if say for example mass of oxygen atom is 1.6736 in 10 power minus 24 grams, then in terms of AMU, what is it going to be? 1.6736 in 10 power minus 24 by 1.66056, because this is what the value of AMU. If you divide by the AMU value means we will know what is the mass of hydrogen in terms of AMUs. What is it? 1.0078, or we can approximate it as what? 1.008. Similarly, if you look at what is the mass of one oxygen atom, as I said, oxygen also will have isotopes. We are looking at what? Oxygen 16. What is the mass in terms of AMU? 15.995 AMU. So today, right, instead of using AMU in some textbooks, right, you will see instead of saying 15.995 AMU, they will put 15.995 U. This U is also the equivalent unit. It is called as what? Unified mass. Both are same. In some old textbooks you will find AMU, but the newer ones, right, you will be finding what? A unified mass symbol U. Both are the same thing. Now, one thing we need to observe is when we are doing about the calculations, right, we may not use the oxygen atomic mass as 15.995 mu. We may approximate this to what? 16 mu. Hydrogen, we may not every time use 1.008 AMU, we may use it as what? 1 AMU. So we will do some approximations, and that is allowed. Only when you're talking about the nuclear reactions, when you go to +2 physics, right, you will see that these kind of approximations will not be allowed there, because in nuclear reactions there will be small change in the mass. You cannot approximate there. That you will study later, but for us we can just approximate. We know that the mass values will not be round figure. These are not numbers. See, this is sometimes people will confuse why the mass number is rounded off. See, when you say oxygen 16 means 16 is what? Mass number. It's a number of protons plus number of neutrons. But this is what? Atomic mass. It is mass. It can be having decimal places. And because we have like most of the elements in the isotopic form, if you want to say what is the mass of atomic mass of carbon, we have to take the average of these isotopic atomic masses based on the abundance. Average is based on the abundance, percentage abundance. If you want to say what is the atomic mass of chlorine, we have to take what is the average. See, for example, if you look at the existence of many of the elements, right, they will be having more than one isotopic form. And by looking at the relative abundance or percentage abundance, right, look at this. Carbon has got 3. We talked about mostly what? Carbon 12 and carbon 14. Carbon 14 because of its importance. It will be radioactive. It will be used in the method called as carbon dating, that is used for the finding of approximate age of these fossils and dead organisms. Look at this. The carbon 12 atomic mass approximately, you will take all the approximate values. Percentage abundance is what? 98.892, 1.108. 2 in 10 power minus 10. Look at this. Carbon 14. That's why we said what? One of these isotopes will be predominantly in major proportion. The others will be usually, this is a usual case. The others will be usually what? It will be relatively less in terms of proportion. Some of the isotopes may be unstable also. Like in this case, carbon 14 is what? Radioactive means unstable. Same with hydrogen also. Hydrogen tritium is what? Unstable. So look at this. What is the formula? It's the average formula. Average means what? Percentage abundance into the atomic mass. We have to add all these. Divide by 100. Why? Because the sum of all the percentage is what? 100, right? So you can also look at this. There is a 100 division, right? If you divide each of the percentage abundance by 100 means what? You will get fractional abundance into atomic mass of the isotope. This value we have to add it. Sigma means what? Addition. Look at this. For the carbon 12, what is the fractional abundance? 98.892 by 100. That is what? 0.98892 into its atomic mass is 12 Then fractional abundance. Then carbon 14 fractional abundance. You can see it will be very small. So you'll see overall atomic mass is what? 12.011 U. Overall atomic mass will be close to the isotope, that is in more abundance. Obviously, right, whenever you have the weighted average formula, what is this kind of formula called as? Weighted average formula. This weighted average is based on the percentage abundance. Okay. So these are the atomic masses of some of the common elements. Like we know the common elements, right? We'll of course have to remember the atomic numbers because they will be useful for us in a lot of discussions related to the electronic configuration. The atomic masses, right, for the common elements we'll have to remember because they will be useful for us in stoichiometry problems. So we'll see not just stoichiometry, in some other physical chemistry chapters also we'll be keep on using this atomic masses. So common elements, right, these atomic mass values are in terms of the AMU unit or unified mass unit. Hydrogen approximately, so we know it is 1.008, but we take it as what, approximately 1. Carbon is, we know it is what, just now only we saw, right, 12.011, but we take it as approximately 12 only. Nitrogen 14, oxygen is what, 16, fluorine 19, sodium is what, 23. Chlorine, it is the average of the atomic mass of two isotopes of chlorine, chlorine 35 and chlorine 37. Iron approximately 56. Copper is another important element. Like a lot of stoichiometry analysis problems we may have copper involved. Copper 63.5. Silver Ag 108. Potassium 39. Sulfur 32. Phosphorus 31. Calcium is 40. So you remember, the Newland law of octaves, right? Is the limit. Up to calcium only, the Newland law of octaves was accepted by the elements. Yeah. So what is the atomic mass here? It is 40. Magnesium is what, 24. Aluminum 27. Then we have silicon. Silicon is 28. Then Pb is the lead. Lead is what, 207. Similarly, if you look at the molecules, what is a molecule? Atoms combine to form a molecule. So today we know that we can have molecules in which atoms of same element can be there. Like H2 is a molecule, O2 is a molecule. Or atoms of different elements can be there. H2O is a molecule, like that. CH4 is a molecule. So how do we get the molecular mass? Just simply add the atomic mass of the elements that are present inside the molecule. That's it. So take example of a methane. One carbon atom is there, 4 hydrogens. One carbon, we are taking the exact value, 12.011. 4 hydrogens, 4 into 1.008. Otherwise, if you take one carbon to be 12, 4 hydrogens, we will say what is it? Approximately 16 AMU. Okay, so as I said, right, we don't have to really worry up to these decimal places. We can round them off. That's fine for our stoichiometry calculations. Similarly, you want to find the molecular mass of water. Water has got 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen. So 2 hydrogens, 2 into 1.008. 1 oxygen is what, 16. Totally what is it? 18.02 U. If you just take the round of figures, means what? 2 hydrogens, 2 into 1. 1 oxygen. We will say 18. That is the molecular mass of water. Now we also have one more form in which the chemical substance can exist. That is what we call as the ionic form. Not everything will be having molecules. We can have ionic form. So we will learn about this in detail in chemical bonding chapter, and also the structure in which these ionic compounds actually exist. So we will call it as the ionic lattice. For example, we talk about sodium chloride itself. You will not have molecules or anything. How the solid will be arranged in the 3-dimensional packing, right? It will be arranged with each Na plus ion surrounded by 6 Cl minus ions. So positive ion will be surrounded by what? 6 Cl minus ions. These interactions, right, they are basically called as what? Electrostatic, because positive and negative ions will be attracting each other, right? So what do we call them as? Electrostatic interactions. That is the reason for the ionic compound formation. So in ionic compound, you will not have a molecular formula. Like water here in this case, we will not have a molecular formula. But what we will be having is the simple formula of the ionic compound. Simple formula means what? Let's say there are 1 lakh sodium ions if you take sodium chloride means in that you will also have 1 lakh chloride ions. Take a simple ratio. What is it? 1:1. So the simple formula of the ionic compound will be what? NaCl. If you talk about something else like magnesium chloride. In magnesium chloride, right? If you take the magnesium chloride ionic compound, for 1 lakh magnesium ions, you will find 2 lakh chloride ions. So the formula will be what? 1:2 is the ratio. The formula for the magnesium chloride will be what? MgCl2. In fact, in our 9th standard, right, we have seen how do we write this formula by using the valency concept, isn't it? Magnesium valency, to remember the crisscross method. How do you write the formula? Crisscross method, how do you write it? Magnesium valency is what? 2. Chlorine valency is 1. So what we will say? We have to crisscross. So this is what we have done in our 9th standard. Magnesium valency is what? +2, chlorine -1, crisscross. So the 1 will come here, 2 will go there. What is the formula? MgCl2. Okay. So for the ionic compound, right? So we will be calculating mass based on this particular formula. That is what we will be calling as the formula mass. So what is the formula mass of sodium chloride means? Look at the formula. 1 sodium means 23. 1 chloride means what? 35.5. Add them, it will be what? 58.5. So what do we call it as? Formula mass. We will be calling it as what? The formula mass. Okay. Now look at this one. Calculate the molecular mass of glucose. So glucose, this one, right? What is it called as? Molecular formula. So now keep one thing in mind. If we want to get the molecular mass, we can get the molecular mass by using the molecular formula. But experimentally, we will have methods to find the molecular mass value. So there will be some experimental methods. Without knowing the glucose molecular formula, we can find the molecular mass of glucose by using our experimental methods. That we will see later. But here, if you know glucose formula, C6H12O6, 12 carbons are there. 6 into 6 carbons are there. 6 into 12.011. 12 hydrogens are there. 12 into 1.008. 6 oxygens are there. 6 into 16. If you add all of them, right, what we will get? 180.162. If you take the approximate values, look at the 6 carbons, 6 into 12. 12 hydrogens, 12 into 1. 6 oxygens, approximate values. What is this? 72 plus 12 plus 16, 6 are what? This is 96. So what we will have? 72 plus 12 is what? 84 plus 96. What is this? 180 AMU. So we will, as I said, in most cases we will go with this rounded number. So like this we can get the molecular mass of various commonly used chemical substances. Like we use CO2. CO2 will have what? 1 carbon means I will say 12. 2 oxygens. What is it? 12 plus 32. What is it? 44. H2SO4, sulfuric acid. I am not showing you how these will come. I mean, we can see that also. H2SO4 means what? 2 hydrogens plus sulfur, 32 plus 4 oxygens. Totally it will be what? 98. You can check this by yourself also. KMNO4, potassium permanganate, and K2Cr2O7, potassium dichromate. These two are very common when we go to the redox reaction chapter and all that, right? We will keep seeing these two compounds very often. Okay, so what are these? KMNO4 and K2Cr2O7. KMNO4, what is the molecular mass? 158 AMU. Manganese, right? We can take the atomic mass approximately to be what? 55 AMU. Chromium, we can take the atomic mass to be what? 52 AMU approximately. So using these values we can calculate. Okay. So how for the potassium permanganate 158 will come? Check it how this 158 will come. Potassium is what? 39 plus manganese is what? 55 plus 4 oxygens 4 into 16. 4 16s is what? This is 64. So 39 plus 55 is this is 94 plus 64 is what? 158. That's how the KMnO4 molecular mass will come. K2Cr2O7, what is the value? 294. Sodium hydroxide, sodium 23. What is there in sodium hydroxide? See, we can take some time to show all these things how they are coming, but you can also probably try and work it out by yourself. I mean, this is not there in the, because you can see the tables, right? I have kept the tables. This is not there in the NCERT. Why we are looking at this is because it will be important. So sodium hydroxide is what? Sodium is 23 plus oxygen is 1 plus 1. What is it totally? 40 AM it will come. Calcium carbonate is another limestone, 100. Okay, calcium 40, 1 carbon is 12 plus 3 oxygens, 3 into 16. Totally what is it? 100 it will come. Magnesium oxide is 40. FeSO4, ferrous sulfate, 152. Urea, this is a very useful substance that we will see quite often. What is the formula for the urea? NH2CO NH2. Okay, urea is the first organic compound to be synthesized inside the laboratory. What is the molecular mass? You see here, NH2CO NH2, right? Nitrogen, 2 nitrogens are there. So 2 into 14 will come, plus how many hydrogens are there? 4 hydrogens are there. 4 into 1 will come. How many oxygens? 1 oxygen. How many carbons? 1 carbon. So what is it? 28 plus 4 plus 16 plus 12 is what? Another 28. 28 plus 28 is what? 56 plus 4 is what? 60. Ammonia, we will see this also very often in our stoichiometry analysis. What is it? 1 nitrogen and 3 hydrogens, 17. Copper sulfate, right? 162. Copper oxide, copper, we call this as what? Copper 2 oxide, because the oxidation state of copper is 2, 79.54. Water, we have seen this already. What is it? 18. So we can try and remember, again I am saying, just like the atomic masses, right? Molecular mass also in one go we might not be able to remember, but as we keep solving more and more problems involving these values, right, it'll start getting into our memory. Okay. So this is about the part 2b, and we'll see in the part 3.